Previously on Chaos Head Noah.
匠、私は導きで、君が救世主。そう決まっているの。だから何をしてもいいのよ。私に叶えてあげるわ。君のどんな望みでも。
I didn't really get what she was trying to say. I figured she was probably just spewing her crazy delusions again, but either way, I didn't mind.
匠、匠。
Ayase kissed me again. Except this time, it was nothing like before. This time, Ayase's tongue, slick with saliva, forced my mouth open, shoved its way deep inside, and coiled around my own. Nothing else mattered to me anymore. I just let myself give in to the pleasure, embracing Ayase's slender, subtle hips.
そろそろね。
Drawing near. What was?
グラジオールは間もなく目覚めるわ。ツイグラーの予言によれば。心して匠、最悪に包まれるのよ、世界は。君は見たこともない世界を見ることになる。でも乗り越えて、そうしなければグラジオールを倒せない。
Yase's voice lacked its usual composure. It was almost like she was scared. Would it really be that bad? Whatever was about to happen? Or should I say the delusion that she was about to turn to reality?
まだ心の準備が。
だったら急いで。もう時間がないわ。世界は約67億ある。そう言ったはずよ。空の色も67億通りある。みんな見ているものが同じだとは限らないわ。
The scenery went back to normal. This color was my world's.
綾瀬はずっとあんな世界を見てきたの。
Ayase gave a slight nod.
生まれた時からずっとそれが当たり前のことだと思っていたわ。世界の構造として。でも違うのね。今匠の話を聞いて理解できたわ。
あの黒いもやは何なの？
写真よ。誰でも持っているものなの、人ならば。そしてこの写真がグラジオールの糧となり、形を作り出していく。見えた？人々の負の妄想が。
Wait. Was the stack causing negative delusions to bubble to the surface? Was that why I'd been seeing all that inhuman savagery? There it was again. The same look as when she had taken Yua's D-sword. The same as when I had first seen her world back at the Scramble Crossing. The same as when she had obtained Sena's and Kosube's D-swords. Ayase looked at me on the verge of tears, doing everything she could to hold them back.
そんなつもりじゃないの。写真を制御できなくなっている。私も取り込みすぎたせいかもしれない。理想度。写真王の精神侵食で私はおかしくなりつつある。匠、
tightly embraced her slender hips.
本当にいいの？
いいわ。
With a gulp, I reached my hand toward the black miasma pouring out of her chest. Following only an ephemeral moment, the miasma changed form to that of a black leech. An act only served to make it all the more repulsive. That was Ayase's wicked heart laid bare. The most hideous part of herself that she didn't want anyone else to see. That was what the mass was. I took hold of the leech's body. It was extremely slippery, and it was so cold, it stung at my palm. Having entrusted her entire body to me, Ayase gently caressed my cheek.
不浄なる邪神は君の手で純粋な邪神へと変わるわ。
The black wicked heart wriggling my arm suddenly shone violet. A sound burst forth from it, a sound so shrill it was akin to the loudest of screams. Well, I'll be damned! We found yet another way to manifest a D-sword.
だから歌うんだ。グラジオールを倒す歌を歌ってよ、フェス。
歌えというの？この状況で。
歌を歌うことで導きが現れるって前に言ってたじゃないか。
そうね、言ったわ。そしてあのライブで匠と出会えた。匠。
Ayase extended her hand to me. I took her hand in my own and squeezed it tightly.
匠は好き？私の歌。
You got a terrific singing voice.
うん。
I listened to the album I bought from that concert many times. I left the concert early due to my fear of crowds, but she made me want to try again, and again, and again, however many times it would take. See me nod along, Ayase smiled blissfully.
ここで滅びても別にいいかもしれない。匠がそう言ってくれたから。歌うわ。聞いていて。匠。開け。天国の扉。
Her entire body curved like a bow being drawn. And then, with all the strength vested in her, she cast her shot forth. The sword carved a trail of light, blew away the darkness of a loud boom, and pierced through the vermilion heavens. It had completely penetrated it. The sky began to crack. The crack spread throughout the entire sky, and before long, accompanied by a flood of sound, the entire world shattered.
青はあんなに美しい色をしていたのね。
見えるの？
見えるわ。匠が見ているのと同じ色の空が。
And what a clear color it was. So clear I could feel it in my chest. So clear it almost hurt to look at. Who knew that the sky above was so clear? Before now, I had never once realized. Shibuya was in shambles, transformed into a city of death. Not even a glimmer of its former glory was left in it. And yet, Ayase, appearing more dazzling than ever, looked fondly over it all.
世界はこんなにも美しいのね。
And with those words, Ayase gently clasped my hand. And so it continues. Greetings, my name's Neosekken, and welcome back to my Let's Play of Chaos Head Noah. So, 7 endings down, 2 to go. All we have left now is Rimi's route, and whatever is going to be in store for us for the true ending. We're getting awfully close. And I'm certainly curious to see if there's anything new we can learn about Rimi and her route. Certainly hope it'll be better than what Ayase's route ended up turning out to be for me. So, we all know the drill at this point. Let's get right to it. Positive of this one. Oh, new one already? Felt like it should have been obvious to him how much I didn't want to go and see a puddle of blood and gore. It would have been way too much for me. It wouldn't be like a haunted house or a horror movie or something. People had actually died IRL, and the killer was still on the loose. So, wherever the murder was likely to be, I'd have liked to be anywhere but there. Still, I was curious about the murderer. What could have possibly been their motive? Were they just a psychopath that committed crimes for the hell of it? That was probably the most reasonable explanation. Well, whatever. It didn't really matter to me. I mean, I was a serial killer too. And even though I'd killed hundreds, people still treat me like a hero. That was in ESO though. Lol. Just goes to show how much better the 2D world is. I don't know. If you were part of a genocidal cult, I'm pretty sure you'd still be lauded as a hero. If you were someone who had a body count in the hundreds. Anyway, as I tried my hardest to turn down Misumi-kun's proposal, I imagined myself like a brawler straight out of some fighting game. A psycho killer? If I ran into a guy like that, I'd turn him into mincemeat. In my delusions, I could kill or spare anyone I wanted. But the people who actually tried to live out those sort of delusions were idiots. Didn't they know that real-life actions had real-life consequences? Some just don't care. Even the new-gen killer would be caught eventually, and then they'd rot in prison for years. Decades even. Just waiting to be sent to the gallows. If I could say one thing to them, it'd be, what a pity. You really should have just kept your delusions to yourself. I went out to buy myself some dinner. I took the road I always use to get to my local convenience store. It was only a 3-minute walk from my base. I'd walked down this dirty alley more times than I could count. But for some reason, walking through it today, I couldn't help but feel as if I'd stepped into another world. The alley was the same as ever, but it felt like it was the first time I'd ever set foot in it. Familiar, yet new, like the opposite of deja vu. I'd researched the phenomenon online before. The name for it was apparently Jami's View. What's more, the stench of rotting garbage was lingering in the air. Is this the delusion featuring the black cat? This feels familiar. The moisture in the atmosphere was so thick that, if I hadn't known any better, I'd have assumed it had just been raining. The air was like syrup on my skin. I heard a sound. The faint sound of something dragging across the ground. I stopped in my tracks and listened closely. It sounded like it was coming from up ahead, from somewhere down the alley and around the corner. Without any streetlights or lit-up windows, it was pitch black down there. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see a thing. It was strange. This was modern-day Shibuya, a place that, along with Shinjuku, was known as the city that never sleeps. So how could there still be places like that? Places that were this dark? Excuse me. It almost felt like the entrance to a haunted house. Actually, there was one very large distinction. This darkness wasn't man-made. It was real. I didn't want to go any farther. Nothing good would come from it. My brain set off every alarm bell it could, to try and prevent my body from taking another step. But for some inexplicable reason, my body stepped forward anyway, as if drawn to that repeating sound. My fear urged me to stop, that something horrible would happen if I kept going. My heart started racing. My forehead was slick with sweat.
その先に
Rimi? Suddenly, a noise that was beautiful, yet somehow discordant at the same time, reached my ears. A voice, garbled by static. Before I knew it, someone had grabbed my forearm. It was all too sudden. I panicked and tried to scream for help, but all that came out was a puff of air. Terrified, I tried to force my body to run away, but it wouldn't listen. I couldn't move an inch. I looked toward my arm, and the hand of the thing that had grabbed me came into view. It was dark green, with skin taut like a mummy's. Countless veins protruded from the surface.
行くの
It didn't look alive. To be honest, it made sense that I couldn't move. Going all deer in headlights was a natural reaction to what was happening. What was surprising to me, though, was that the voice in my ears was so soothing. The fear swelling inside me was starting to vanish.
危険
A serious, yet gentle voice. I slowly looked over my shoulder. The first thing I noticed was the Sume Academy emblem. The same emblem you could find sewn onto the chest of each and every Sume uniform. Then I noticed that the person was wearing a skirt, which meant she was a girl. But I didn't have the courage to look at the most important part. Her face. She was staying way closer than I was expecting, so I couldn't bring myself to face her. I couldn't put my finger on why, but for some reason, something seemed off. So I turned my attention back toward her hand. The hand gripping my arm was delicate and feminine, even though just a moment ago, I had seen it as green and grotesque. This girl, who was she? What kind of expression was on her face? What kind of expression was she making at me? What was she doing here? I had no idea why, but for some reason, I felt like I knew her. While staring at the pale hand wrapped around my arm, I tried to envision what she looked like. In my delusion, she... We're being given a yes and no prompt here, of all places? Interesting. Has a ribbon in her hair. Well, yeah, she certainly does. Is wearing glasses. No, Rimi does not wear glasses. Is wearing over-the-knee socks. Ooh. Yeah, she definitely does wear that. Is wearing a long skirt. No, she doesn't wear a long skirt. Is making some sort of salute at me. In spite of all my questions, I couldn't manage to get a single word out. I simply hung my head in silence. At some point, the dragging sound had stopped.
もう帰って。
And in its place, there was a smell coming from her body.
たくみくん。
The stench of blood.
これはいい。
I was sitting behind a computer monitor. I chugged down a cola to contain my excitement, then leaned back in my chair. That'd been one hell of a delusion. You made that delusion, Shogun? I especially liked that mystery girl. I might give her a name and flesh out her personality in future delusions. I let my imagination run wild like this all the time. Usually I'd go on to cast an existing character as the girl, such as Saratan, so I might as well do that here too. Actually, Sarah didn't quite fit the vibe of that mystery girl. Not even close. Well, at any rate, it was a lot of fun mixing together 2D and 3D in my delusions. Takumi would consider that blasphemy. I was the god of the world inside my head. And there, everything bent to my will.
次はちょっとエロ要素も。
Oh wait, this is Takumi, not Shogun. The laugh gave it away. I said that to myself as if I were at my base, but when I remembered I was in an internet cafe, I quickly covered my mouth. I quietly peeked outside. It didn't seem like anyone had heard me just now, so... meh. Two hours prior. The light of the sunset bathed the hospital room in a vibrant orange. All was silent, as if time itself had stopped. Only a single person was present. Completely still, as if asleep, sat a boy in a wheelchair. It was around the time of day where one would find nurses rushing around the hospital, serving patients their dinners. And yet, no such signs of activity made their way to the room. A moment later, the silence was broken by the sound of a door opening. A lone girl entered the room. Hello, Rimi. The boy in the wheelchair lifted his head to acknowledge her, but did not speak. For a moment, the girl hesitated at the entrance. Looking around the room, she could sense a faint aura of loneliness emanating from it. The drab-looking room was minimal in size and reeked of disinfectant. This was where the two of them spent their days. An isolated location, eternally unknown to the rest of humanity. Not a single soul, be they a doctor, nurse, friend, or relative, ever came to visit. The boy and girl rarely exchanged words with one another. The boy had been hospitalized, and for a whole year had been comatose. Only just a month ago had he awoken. The girl had been essentially using his room as a place to stay. However, as much as she did trust him, their relationship had nothing to do with any sort of romantic or sexual attraction. Her only goal was to repay her debt to the boy. Nothing more, nothing less. The boy was intentionally cold and distant, having even told her not to return once before. Yet all the same she remained. This was, in part, because she had nowhere else to go. During his coma, she had been his lone caretaker. The couch in the room had become her bed, and even now, after he had awoken, she still used it as such.
ご飯買ってきたよ。
She spoke with warmth and sincerity as she held out a bag of food she had brought from the convenience store. Her words scared away the static atmosphere and breathed a new life into the dead world that surrounded them. The girl surrendered herself to such an illusion, but did not mention this to the boy as she laid several kinds of bread atop the empty bed.
いつも思うんだけどさ、こんな食事で体は大丈夫？
もともと先は長くないから買ってこさせてごめん。い
いのいいの、私の分のついでだから気にしないで。
She forced herself to smile at the boy. Then, taking an egg sandwich for herself, she moved toward the window. Upon opening the window, the crisp autumn breeze permeated the quiet hospital room. Comfortably greeted by the wind, the girl narrowed her eyes and perched nimbly on the windowsill. The room was located considerably high up. Imaginably, falling would mean certain death. This, however, hardly mattered to the girl, who simply took a hearty bite out of her sandwich. The boy in the wheelchair paid her no heed. He did not even attempt to reach for the bread laid out on the bed.
ねえ、もう一度聞くけど、本当に彼を覚醒させるつもり？
うん。昨日チャットをしてみてはっきりした。のぞみはすでに彼に目をつけている。ノア2も完成間近だし、急がないと。
どうしてもやるの？
そうだよ。
でもそれじゃのぞみと変わらない。彼に恐怖を与えて追い詰めて。
彼しかいないんだ。
彼が覚醒すればあなたは死ぬのに。
最初から覚悟の上だよ。彼に全ての責任を押し付けようとしている僕には相応の罰だと思う。
The girl kept her gaze focused on the setting sun, not daring to look over her shoulder at the boy. Her countenance laid her emotions bare. She looked as if she might burst into tears at any moment.
彼を消すっていう選択肢はないかな。
そうなったら僕はまた1年以上昏睡する覚悟で新しい僕を生み出さないとね。その頃にはノア2は完成して世界には絶望があふれているだろうけど。
Despite his gentle tone, his words were laced with a touch of cynicism. Upon hearing them, the girl couldn't help but let out a sigh.
私はあなたのやり方には反対だな。
ノア2を完成させるわけにはいかない。
そうだけど、彼の立場を考えたら、悲しすぎるよ。それに、あなたが自殺しようとしているのを、むざむざ指をくわえて見ているわけにもいかないし。
自殺じゃないよ。
私が、なんとかする。
The boy finally moved a little, taken aback by the girl's abrupt yet resolute words.
なんとかって？
Finishing off the last of her sandwich, she stepped down from the windowsill, then turned to face him. Then, for some inexplicable reason, she snapped into a pose resembling that of a salute.
私が、望みから、彼を守る。
Well, you're not really good at it, if all the other routes we've seen so far are any indication. Your heart's in the right place, but your actual ability to live up to such a promise is certainly wanting. Or lacking, rather.
そうすれば、あなたは死なないから。
それじゃあ、彼が生まれた意味がなくなるし、何の解決にもならない。ノア2が。
ノア2も、私が何とかするって。
君には、無理だよ。
もう、決めたの。私は、あなたを守るために、あなたと対立します。
She gave him a frail, yet tender smile. At the sight of this, the boy lost any and all words he had.
あなたの予言によると、今日、新しい事件が起きるんだよね。
予言じゃない。事実だよ。彼らの妄想を見たからね。
だったら、彼をその事件に近づけさせないようにしなくちゃ。私、ちょっと行ってくるね。
She approached the door.
君が邪魔をしても、僕は予定通り彼を目覚めさせるよ。
As she opened the door, hearing the boy's words directed at her back, she paused for one final time. No signs of life came from the hallway. Not a single human being was in sight, and not a single sound reached the room.
ねえ。私たちって、何なんだろう。誰にも存在を知られずに、ここにもう1年以上いる。ここにいると、自分っていう存在は幻なんじゃないかって思えてきちゃうの。ジメジメ気分になるのは、やっぱり病院だからかな。
リミ、君は関わるべきじゃない。
Despite the boy's pleading, the girl did not look back.
パン、ちゃんと食べるんだよ。
After murmuring those last few words, the girl left the hospital room. Oh, yet another new thing. She too had heard that sound. Before, there had been a strange whirring sound, like something tearing its way through the air. I also hear a Note 2 terminal. Soon after she heard it, she discovered its origin. A rucksack worn by a nearby, suspicious-looking person. When she attempted to pursue them, however, they escaped. That was when she heard another sound echoing in the distance. The shrill sound of stakes being nailed into a wall. And, though faint, the whirring sound from before could still be heard as well. The two sounds resonated in grating harmony, creating an illusion that her ears may start bleeding at any moment.
手遅れだった。
Lightly biting her lip, she sprinted toward the source of the sound. And there, her eyes landed upon a corpse affixed to a wall by several cross-shaped stakes. Interesting. This is the same photo. This is the same image of the photo of the crime scene that I saw in the police briefing. So that photo wasn't a fake after all, like I initially thought. Startled, she surveyed her surroundings. Though she loved to admit it, the status of the victim did not matter to her in the slightest. If granted the opportunity, she would naturally have preferred to save him, but it was much too late. And now, there were more important matters at hand. She couldn't let Nishijo Takumi see this place. She couldn't let him be consumed by fear. Where could he be? With that on her mind, she returned her gaze to the corpse. And now it suddenly is a lot more gruesome. She was at a loss for words. She had only looked away for a second, and yet in that short time, countless stakes had gruesomely mutated the corpse. Just a moment ago, there had only been a few stakes on the wall, just enough to suspend the corpse in midair. There hadn't even been any external injuries, let alone blood. But now, a grisly spectacle lay before her eyes. So, both images of the crime are actually real, or true in a sense, then? The sight of it left her reeling in horror, frantically fighting to endure her nausea. Her vision distorted as uncertainty seized her heart.
妄想が現実を侵食してる。
In that moment, the girl came to notice that the changes did not end there. Her clothes were different. She was wearing a uniform unfamiliar to her, from a school she didn't recognize. In addition, her body was stained with crimson, and in her hand was a stake.
嘘。これって妄想がシンクロを。
Someone's illusions had edited the scene around her. The gruesome corpse, her clothes, the rich scarlet blood. Was any of it real?
違う。
It couldn't possibly be real. There was no stench of blood. She couldn't feel the icy chill of the metal stake in her hand. She put her hand to her bloody cheek, and it came away dry. She carefully reached for one of the stakes planted in the body. But when she tried to grab it, her hand grasped nothing but air. Everything was a delusion. A far, far too vivid delusion. But at any moment, the delusion could become reality. It had already taken form. Once rebooted, it would emerge with reality. What was she to do? The girl was overtaken by doubt. A delusional space like this, oozing negativity, was well beyond anything she was used to dealing with. Such a powerful deluder may have already taken Nishijo Takumi's life. She might suddenly find Takumi pinned to the wall in this man's place. At this point, it would not even surprise her. Driven by anxiety, she let out a soft cry, and right at that moment,
あの時の将軍のリンク写真。
the terrified scream of a boy resounded from behind her. That was not a scream. More like a proclamation. At first, she seemed shocked, but her expression quickly changed to a somber smile. And then,
よかった。
she softly whispered those words. Thank goodness. Oh, I could skip that. And yet another new thing. Getting all kinds of new stuff with Rimi's route. The vast majority of the nurses at Yoyogi's General Hospital were out making the rounds. Only one could still be found sitting alone at the nurse's station. She stared at a laptop with a deadpan expression on her face. Despite not being on break, she was in the middle of a phone call. It did not seem to matter to her in the slightest that she was violating her work's policy on cell phone usage. I see Hazuki is getting right to work. Reflected in her blank eyes was a certain chat log, shining brightly on the computer screen before her.
ええ、そう。現れたのよ。西條拓海が。
間違いないっすか？
多分。
Speaking on the other end of the call was a man. It was clear from how they spoke to one another that the conversation had nothing to do with work.
名前はハンドルネームを使っているけれど、あの公式のことを知っていたもの。ログをコピーして送るわ。
With a mechanical flick of her wrist, Nurse moved the mouse with the intention of copying the log. However, she suddenly stopped. Her brow furrowed.
ら？
どうしたんす？
The nurse ignored the man's question, narrowing her eyes as she brought her face closer to the screen. The screen still displayed the chat logs. However, something seemed different from a few seconds prior. Something had changed. An impossibility considering they were logs, not real-time conversations. And yet, even though everything had felt perfectly normal a moment ago, something felt incredibly out of place now.
ログの書き込み時間が変わってる。
どういうことだ？
The man understood how absurd her claim was, and the voice on the other end of the call became much lower.
ついさっきまでは不自然なところなんてなかったのに、これ一体どうなって？
落ち着け。相手は化け物級のギガロマニアックだ。
細工されたのかしら。
自分の実在を知られたくないためだろ。
書き込み時間が変化したことで自作自演のように見えてくるわ。
そう見えるな。それが狙いってことだ。現実を妄想にした。気をつけろシノ。見られているぞ。奴に。
Suddenly, a sense of uneasiness crept up the back of Shino's neck. Covering her nape with her hand, she turned to face the source of the gaze. But there was nobody there. Not a single soul could be found within the nurse's station. About damn time he started staring at someone else's neck.
信仰の救いあれ。
Shino murmured those words of prayer to herself, hoping they would sweep the fear away. Hmm.
コーラしかないじゃん。ミルクティーとか用意しといてよ。
Well, take a brief minute just to pause and gather my thoughts on some of the stuff that just transpired. I mean, well, yeah, we knew that Hazuki and Suo were monitoring the chat logs pretty much since the beginning, so no surprise to see that happen. But I guess one thing that I didn't know beforehand is the context regarding how Rimi came to get her uniform, and by extension, I suppose, her own place within Sume Academy. If her getting that uniform was the result of a delusion synchronization, like what we just saw a minute ago, maybe she then got the idea to just infiltrate the school proper in order to keep an eye on Takumi, since, well, it's his uniform too. It's the same school he goes to, so you know. It's kind of like putting simple 2 and 2 together, really, for her at that point. At least I think that's what one of the things that they were trying to communicate to me, the player. But I could be missing something or completely misreading it. I have a feeling I might be. If nothing else, like I said, I guess it's nice to just get some additional context behind those key events that occurred. Even if they don't really change much of my actual understanding of how events played out beforehand. Now, what I want to know is, how long is it going to be until we get to something new again? God damn it! Oh! Sakihara Rimi remained expressionless as she moved forward. She was walking down one of Sume Academy's many hallways, this one lined with classrooms for second-year students. She was not accustomed to wearing a uniform, as this was her first time setting foot in this place. She paid no mind to all the other students in her vicinity. However, her apparent composure was a mere facade. One tended desperately to conceal a boiling point of unease within her. Her somewhat awkward march through the halls betrayed this, as she proceeded toward her destination. She kept her head held high all the same. Soon enough, she reached room 2C.
ここか。
She already knew the answer. This was Nishijo Takumi's class. She placed her hand on the closed door. Only then did she realize that her fingers were trembling. On a normal day, I would have wanted to come here. Such a desire crossed her mind for a moment, but she stopped her delusions from progressing any further. After taking a small breath, she vigorously slid the door open. Her stoic expression faded, as if it had never existed to begin with. The classroom before her was remarkably cheerful, overflowing with energy. She lifted her right hand to her forehead, snapping into the pose of a salute. Rimi's greeting resounded throughout the classroom, and the classroom fell as silent as death itself. Class had not started yet, so the room was about half full. But everyone that was there was looking her way, visibly puzzled. And for good reason. Nobody in this class No, nobody in the school knew who she was. And for that very reason, Rimi had to first make sure to draw everyone's attention. Oh, I see. So she had to draw everybody's attention first, and then using her gigolomaniac powers, conjure up false memories of herself in everyone's minds. So she just did it all at once, right smack in the middle of a school day. Quick and efficient, I gotta say. She drew her D-sword, and yet not a soul reacted. The sword, with blades arranged like inflexible feathers, was still a delusion. It was visible to no one. But for her purposes, however, that was enough. Go forth, my delusion. She fired her thoughts at the eyes of those gazing at her. Then, as if it had somehow been planned beforehand, everyone blinked in unison. And then, all at once, the room's frozen atmosphere thawed. Rimi looked around the room once more, and then a smile formed on her face.
おはよう。
おはよう、咲畑。
おーっす。
リーミー、朝っぱらから声大きすぎ。
もっと静かに入ってこいよな。
One after another, each student spoke to her like they had always known her. Even though, until mere seconds ago, they had never seen her before. But it was different now. Rimi had planted delusions into them. Delusions that soon attained mutual recognition. Recognition that Sakihara Rimi is a student at Sume Academy and is a member of Class 2C. 2 days prior, she had tested this trick on Nishijo Taku, but had proven to be not very effective. As a result, she'd been worrying over how exactly it would unfold when she tried it here. But it seemed her anxiety had been unfounded. After seeing the smiles of her chattering classmates, she heaved a sigh of relief. She recalled her D-sword, then approached an empty seat from a vacant row in the back of the room. This desk was another delusion she had created. She placed her bag down, but rather than sitting, she turned to face the boy approaching her.
Yo, Rimi.
Hello, Schmuck 2.0.
よ、ミスミ大輔。ミスミ大輔。ミスミ大輔。
Rimi spoke his name 3 times to ensure her certainty.
なんで3回言った？しかもフルネーム。
そういう気分だったからだよ。大地。
Misumi was Taku's friend. In addition to being quite handsome, he clearly put care into the way he dressed. He wears the same exact uniform that everybody else wears. The only thing he probably touches up is his hair. Rimi did not know how his friendship with Taku had come to be. Perhaps Takumi was responsible, fabricating this friendship through delusions. Oh. If that's the case, then that definitely changes my understanding of how their friendship came to be. Or perhaps Misumi and Taku had truly formed a genuine friendship on their own with no outward interference. Somehow, I doubt that. I doubt that it's genuine, I mean. The cause mattered not. All that mattered was that he and Taku were friends. Rimi's delusion had already implanted fresh memories within him.
タクは？
まだ来てねえな。っていうか、今日はあいつ来る日か？
多分ね。
さすがタクの保護者だな。あいつのスケジュールをちゃんと把握してるなんてよ。
Rimi wore a strained smile. It was a smile formed from feelings of guilt. Everyone's memories had been altered with delusions. This would remain Rimi's secret, with nobody else suspecting a thing. Except the man of the hour himself, of course. Those around her would act friendly with her. However, nothing could change the fact that these relationships had been crafted from falsehoods. She had thought that she had become completely accustomed to loneliness by now. But, by placing herself in this classroom, she was subjecting herself to desolation stronger than ever before.
Now that is irony!
Well, I knew she had tempered with people's memories somehow, but I didn't think it was just that straightforward. The way she ended up going about it, she just burst into the classroom and then just spellcasted everybody all at once, and boom, done. But in hindsight, I think I really should have guessed that. Because like I said a minute ago, it's the most quick and efficient way to go about implanting false memories within a wide group of people. If you're trying to infiltrate someplace like a school, and you don't want anyone to suspect you of being someone who doesn't belong, you just delude everybody all at once, however you can. Makes perfect sense to do it that way. So, you got anything around here that I haven't seen before? Yes, no, maybe so. Oh. Standing in the center of a dimly lit room, Sakihara Rimi hung her head, remaining deathly still. The room's owner, Nishijo Taku, was not currently present. He had not locked the door before he left, so Rimi had easily been able to enter. She checked the time on her cell phone. It was nearly 10 p.m. Is Taku still at Scramble Crossing? If she had been able, she would have helped him straight away. She had already attempted to once before, but the closer she had gone to Scramble Crossing, the denser the crowd had become, and eventually, she had been rendered unable to move. In the end, the Esper Boy's show had concluded before she had reached O-Front. It was then that she had heard Takumi's voice. He pleaded with her to return Nanami's hand. It was not often that Takumi would ask Rimi for a favor. Nozomi had kidnapped Nanami, and they were currently subjecting her to all manner of torture. Takumi had been able to locate her using his mind-reading abilities. And as she and Nanami had been acquainted in the past, hearing this news broke Rimi's heart. A cardboard box sat on the sofa. Contained within it was a cell phone, a petite bangle, and Nanami's severed hand. The sight left Rimi at a loss for words. Concern, anguish, and sorrow overwhelmed her. All at once, memories of her own past hardships flashed through her mind. Forcefully biting her lip, Rimi stared at the hand for a few moments. And then, with a deep breath, she gently closed the lid of the box, sealed it with duct tape, and left the room with the package in tow. Huh, I always thought it was Suwa that came back and stole it. Rimi took out her cell phone and connected to the one seg television broadcasting service. The events at Scramble Crossing had been on the news earlier, so she tuned into it, hoping to confirm something. But when the channel came on, it was in the midst of a commercial break, which must have meant that they were not broadcasting live anymore. In other words, Taku must not have been in Scramble Crossing anymore. Knowing this, Rimi reluctantly returned to the hospital room she shared with Takumi. The lights were off. The room was as pitch black as when she had left it. The bed was empty, as Takumi was sitting in his wheelchair instead. Something that Rimi had become accustomed to.
ナナミの腕は
持ってきた。
Rimi opened the box and presented it to Takumi.
ありがと
直せるかな？直せるよね。
う。わからない。でもこの病院なら冷凍保存しておける設備がある。
Of course, freezing it would be better than nothing. But there was no guarantee that it could ever be returned to her. This is what his eyes conveyed to her.
大丈夫。きっと治るよ。
Rimi boldly declared this with a positive flair.
きっと治るって信じる。もっともその前にナナミちゃんを助け出さなきゃいけないけど。
ナナミは殺されることはないと思う。焦って動くことはないよ。
冷静なんだね。ごめん。今言った言葉は忘れて。それよりタクは今どこにいるかわかる？
この病院に搬送されてきたよ。精神科の病室で眠ってる。
そうなの？
Rimi's eyes widened, and she immediately burst out of the room. Visiting hours had long since ended, forcing Rimi to conceal the sound of her footsteps as she traversed the dim hallways. She knew that both Nozomi and the Cosmic Church of the Divine Light were among the hospital staff, and she could not afford to attract any unwanted attention. Following along an arduous trek, she arrived at the room that Takumi had informed her of. Upon inspecting her surroundings to ensure she would not be seen, she slowly opened the door. The room was pure white, the entirety providing not even the slightest hint of warmth. You know, I think I've asked this question earlier on in the Let's Play series before, but they don't. In order for them to get code samples of the Gigalomaniacs, they don't need to be dead. Yeah. So, they've had at least a couple instances where Takumi was in this hospital, and they could have collected his code sample prior to the big climax of the story, and yet they didn't? Especially here and now? If I'm understanding this right, then my question is, why? Doesn't make sense. The room was pure white, the entirety providing not even the slightest hint of warmth. I mean, sorry for the random little tangent there, but I mean, when these thoughts enter my head, sometimes I just gotta ask them out loud. Rimi silently approached the bed in the center of the room. Taku lay there, sleeping deeply. His forehead beaded with sweat, his eyebrows were furrowed, and a moan would occasionally escape his lips. Rimi reached out toward Taku's cheek, and gently caressed it.
ごめんね。あなたを守ってあげられなくて。
I know, you suck at your job. Your self-imposed job. You unelected bureaucrat. Unable to withhold her emotions any longer, she whispered that into his ear. Fuck you.
おーっと、ここまで行ったのになおも無視しますか。
Oh, whatever. Deal with you later. Well then. Oh. I sensed Rimi shot off the couch and onto her feet. She then came up next to me and slowly picked up the toy D-sword leaning against the table. Ignoring my confusion, she held up the upper part of the sword and assumed a stance.
そんなタクにはこうだ。
She swung the sword down. She was obviously just messing around and wasn't actually trying to hurt me. But regardless, she jabbed me in the back with the tip of the sword. Backstabber!
え、うりゃ。
Next, she bonked me on the head. And when I tried to wave her off in annoyance, she definitely dodged my counter. Takumi, now is your chance to assert your dominance. Take the sword from her and bonk her right back in the head.
ねえねえ、もっと楽しいことしようよ。じゃないと本気で切っちゃうぞ。
楽しいことって。
Mid-diagonal slash aimed straight at my neck. Rimi stopped to ponder a little.
じゃあゲームとか。ほら、タクは得意でしょ。対戦ゲームしようよ。私そういうのやったことないから、いろいろ教えてほしいな。
Unfortunately, the only games I had were ESO and a catalog of eroge, neither of which had versus modes. Well, in the case of the eroges, you could probably make an impromptu mutual masturbation versus match with the help of rosy palms.
I am no pervert.
無理だよ。ソフトがなくて。
I grabbed the tip of the sword and pushed it aside. Dissatisfied, Rimi pursed her lips into a pout, then put the sword back where she'd found it.
だって、せっかく久しぶりに会えたのに。
Okay, and I'm happy to hear that you want to spend time with me, but I'm just not in the mood to do something fun right now. Not with everything going on.
メールだよ、ボケナス。あ、今の何？
あ、いや。
Wait a second. Rimi just heard my Saratan notification tone. Oh god, how embarrassing. What, that's it? Just a jab, just a backstab and a bonk on the head? That's it?
剣を見せてって。
Oh, we got something new here too, huh? And I just realized that I haven't checked for new tips yet. What do we have here? Oh, Dahlia. Ayase's D-sword, with its complete and utter absence of straight lines, represents the true embodiment of chaos. When Ayase materialized the sword, she modeled it after a mythical dragon, which is why the sword takes on a far more organic form than the other D-swords. The dragon appears in the several verses of the Lone Black Knight, a part of the Gladios saga in which one of the Black Knights slays a dragon, then forges a sword from its bones. Now that's hardcore. No way. Could Rimi... Could she really see D-swords too? Not only... For a split second, that was my assumption. Only for it to be immediately proven wrong.
ほら、タクが前に剣のこと話してたでしょ。だから、私も見たいなーって。
それでひっぱたかれたのか？意味わからん。岸本って剣の話ばっかしてるのにな。さっきも病室に入った途端、グラディエーターがどうとか言い出して、マジビビったぜ。
You know, if there's one scene I really would have wanted, I actually want to see, now that I think about it, it's her conversation with Iyase and all the other routes that we don't actually get to see play out proper. Like, if there's anywhere in the game I could think of that'd be an appropriate place to finally show that scene, given the fact that we're seeing several other scenes from her perspective on her route, it would be here. And yet they don't do anything with it. Again, why?
それって。
Oh, we got something new here too. Rimi fell deep in thought, her expression looking troubled about something.
もしかして、ご両親に紹介するみたいな流れ？は？
I couldn't help but gape at the ridiculous statement Rimi had just blurted out.
だとしたら、心の準備がまだ。
違う。そうじゃなくて。
Well, don't. Suddenly, a high-pitched sound pierced my ears. One that sounded almost like a woman's scream. Aoi-san's eyes shot wide open at the sight of my D-sword. Her blow had been fairly quick, but stopping it had been hardly any trouble. Our D-swords resonated with one another, releasing a shrill cry that enveloped the two of us. I could feel Aoi-san's negative emotions, her fury, her hatred, coming forth through her D-sword.
先花さんも気がロマニアックスだったのら。
Behind me, Taku sank to the floor in shock. In that state, it would be impossible to get him to escape at this point. So I had no choice but to deal with Aoi-san somehow.
その男が何をしたか知っているのか？ IR2 という公式を。
知ってるよ。
I cut Aoi-san short. I didn't want Taku to even hear its name.
それなら
タクを覚醒させればもっと大変なことになる。
その前に殺す。
あなたには無理だよ。
Aoi-san was incredibly aggressive, but she fundamentally misunderstood how a D-sword should have been used. Her attacks were far too straightforward, far too impulsive. Treating her sword as just a simple sword would translate to a little kid swinging around a tree branch. There was a distinct difference between someone who had been properly instructed on how to wield it and an ordinary high school girl. Dealing with her would be child's play. And who instructed you on how to use this D-sword?
西条は死ぬべき男だ。この世に最悪を振りまいたんだから。
Aoi-san had been consumed by hatred. Her negative delusions were clearly visible to me. Pouring out from within her, they transformed into a hulking black miasma and forcibly pierced into my dead spots. Aoi-san couldn't have been doing it consciously. However, they wouldn't normally be visible to just anyone she faced. This is a characteristic unique to gigalomaniacs. When facing another human, it was possible to make that surge of emotions visible. And with that, you could lay all their emotions bare. I focused my attention on the images that were forcefully being projected into and eroding my mind. The emotions that fueled Aoi-san's hatred. Her memories. I could see them. Her pain. Her sorrow. Her memories of the past that tormented her. And, using those memories, I glared at Aoi-san and formed a delusion. I fabricated a fictitious scene that would twist a knife in her wounds. A shudder ran through her body. Slowly lowering her sword, she then froze completely. Whoops. Her expression showed she was clearly shaken. Her eyes were empty. She was no longer looking at me, nor reality. She was now inside the delusion that I had fabricated. But I had just given her a cue. The rest of the story was of her own making, guided by her own obsession. And now, Aoi-san could no longer fight. I jumped. I could feel a voice reverberating within my mind.
セナさんの心をぐちゃぐちゃにした咲畑さんはその後どうするの？殺しちゃうのかな？
I looked over toward the container house.
もしもね、殺すって言うんなら
A sword of many facets. An overwhelming sense of corrosive misfortune. A pure, unadulterated savagery. And a destructive nobility. It was Orihara-san's D-sword.
咲畑さんのこと悪い人リストに入れちゃうならリストにね入った人は
Upon lifting her D-sword high up in the air, Orihara-san smiled cheerfully at me.
コズピーが皆殺しにするの私は
殺せ
All of a sudden, Taku raised his voice to a shriek.
セナもコズピーも敵なんだ敵だったんだだからリミ殺しちゃえよ僕は死にたくない
タクちょっと黙ってはーいリスト入り
Orihara-san twisted her lips into a smile.
二人とも殺しちゃうから
It came like a storm. The sheer speed at which he charged at me was simply inhuman. I was taken by surprise. Orihara-san's D-sword came down on me like a stake being pounded into the earth. I immediately jumped back, but the impact was so strong, I was blown back anyway. I somehow managed to land on my feet. Next came a horizontal swing. I tried to deflect it with my D-sword. But I failed. I ended up taking the blow head on. My arms went completely numb.
死ね死ね
Orihara-san charged at me with unbelievable strength. I had no room to counterattack. How is she so adept at fighting? Despite her small frame, Orihara-san swung her giant D-sword around with no issue at all. Her footwork was wild and unsteady, Each step she took was incredibly unstable. Her feet were barely touching the ground. Rather than she being the one swinging the sword, it felt as if the sword was swinging her.
滝畑さんも匠ちゃんも悪い人だったんだね。二人とも殺します。タクは殺させない。
As I desperately deflected Orihara-san's blows, just as I had done before with Sena, I focused on the negative emotions pouring out from within her. The image that appeared in the back of my mind was a mirror. Wasting no time, I sent that delusion into Orihara-san's dead spots. Orihara-san's movements came to a sudden halt. Tears began to pour from her eyes. I let out a sigh of relief. I had to get Taku out of here while I still could. That was when I noticed. I couldn't see Aoi-san anywhere. I looked all around the rooftop and saw her standing at the very edge of it. You're not gonna jump, are you? I frantically took off running, but before I could reach her, her body slowly drifted forward. And then, she disappeared over the edge. Good going, Rimi. Golf clap. The sound of something crashing into the ground. The sound of something smashing against the earth. More like splattering. I heard faintly in the distance. Had she died? Had Aoi-san died? Because of that delusion I'd showed her? No, I didn't mean to. A fierce blast of wind came from behind me. The impact was tremendous. It felt like I had been hit by a truck. I felt my brain being shaken around inside my skull. Unable to brace myself beforehand, I was sent flying. I hit the ground hard, and a sharp pain shot through my entire body. I hadn't been cut in any way, but I had taken an extremely hard blow from her fiendish D-sword. My vision was intensely blurry. I tried to get up, but I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't tell who I was anymore. I might have suffered a light concussion. I tried desperately to look up. Orihara-san was staggering around, cradling her head in her hands. She violently shook it from side to side. Had a delusion I'd shown her made her lose sight of who she was? She was moving toward Taku. She was going to kill him. Why didn't you run away? Why are you still here? I had to help him. I closed my fists, but my D-sword wasn't in my hand. I'd accidentally let go of it when I'd been hit by the blast earlier. It was lying on the ground a short distance away from me. Taku was crying out for my help. I have to save him. I won't let anyone kill him. But I'm too far away. I won't make it. Orihara-san already raised her D-sword. Taku would die in an instant. She had sunk to his knees and could no longer move. In less than a second, he would literally be crushed by her D-sword. Tackle her! I have to save him. No matter what I do, I won't make it. Numerous voices surged within me. My thoughts grew erratic. Countless me's pierced me with their gazes from inside my head. Countless me's whispered with their mouths. The whispers continued to cascade, pulling together into a violent flood of voices, each one gnawing away at any and all reason I had. I desperately stood up, but I couldn't do any more than that. I won't make it.
殺させない。
I gritted my teeth. Taku was going to die. Kill her. Kill Orihara Kuzue. If I can protect him, then nothing else matters. No, it's not like that. Kill her. Wouldn't it be better if Taku died here? Kill Orihara Kuzue. Kill Nishijo Takumi. That's the wish of both Sakihara Rimi and Takumi, isn't it? You're wrong!
違う。私はタクを。
Before I knew it, the D-sword was in my hands. It was supposed to be on the ground, yet I was holding it.
私は。
I felt a sensation of gouging flesh. I didn't know how I'd close the distance between me and Orihara-san. But when I looked, I saw that the D-sword I'd been holding in my hands had sunk deep into her delicate back.
私。
I was resisting against a will of some kind. I had no intention of killing her. Or was this really my own will? My true nature? Orihara-san looked back at me with an empty expression on her face.
先畑さん。一体。ノラ。
This is wrong. I don't want to kill her. If I don't stop, she'll... My D-sword wriggled and squirmed. As if it had a will of its own, it trembled with the joy of taking a life. The delight of bathing in blood. I frantically shook my head in denial. My D-sword's wings, its fangs, creaked loudly as they bored at Orihara-san's back. Even now, it was trying to gnaw into her and tear her apart.
ダメだってば。
I tried pulling it out, but I couldn't. I couldn't move. I couldn't even let go of my D-sword. Orihara-san coughed up blood, and when it landed on my sword, dyeing it red. As if it was a pair of wings spreading. Oh dear. It twisted itself deep into Orihara-san's body and tore her apart. Blood burst into the air, and the petite girl who had been alive just a second ago transformed into nothing but mere lumps of flesh. Crimson, illusionary feathers poured down around me.
違う。私はこんなの望んでない。
seeking desperately for someone to save me. I looked around. Taku was staring at me as if he'd seen a monster.
私、
Hey, you asked her to save you, and she did. Don't you dare
殺すつも
complain.
りなんて
Don't you dare complain now, Taku.
殺すつもりなんてなかったのに。
But I killed them anyway. Well, I was definitely not expecting things to play out like that. That's for damn sure. I mean, I don't know for sure what I was expecting to happen on Rimi's route, but definitely not that. Both Sena and Kosupi were dead. They've died right before my very eyes. And Rimi had been the one to kill them. Right now, she was lying down on the sofa, sleeping. After Kosupi had died, she started trembling, let out a scream, and then immediately lost consciousness. I hadn't even been able to stand up for a while from the shock. I've been scared shitless. My fear had kept building and building, and eventually, I couldn't stand to look at Kosupi's bloody corpse any longer. So I got up, carried Rimi to my room, and shut us in. She would occasionally let out a pained moan, but no matter how many times I called her name, she wouldn't regain consciousness. So, I just sat down, hugged my knees, and waited for Rimi to wake up. There wasn't much I could do about my trembling. Sena and Kosupi had just died after all. Unlike the new gen victims, they were far from being complete strangers. I knew them, talked to them, spent time with them. Just yesterday, the three of us had eaten crunchy coons together. Sena, Kosupi, and I. When I saw that photo with the three of us in it, I bit my lip. It didn't matter how much I wanted to forget it. That scene ripped straight from a nightmare played again and again in the back of my mind. Kosupi's vivid, crimson blood. The slimy, sickly texture of the glistening bones sticking out from her body. The emotionless eyes that had lost all light. And the indescribable fear and sickness I'd felt in the moment where I saw another person cease to be a person. The moment when her slender body had been ripped apart had been burned in my retinas. In that moment, I learned how frail people truly were. I felt like I was about to throw up. And if I did end up doing so, that would make it the fourth time I puked. What had ended up happening to Sena? This was an 8-story building. Having fallen all the way from the roof, there was no way she'd made it out unscathed. She'd definitely died. The two of them were both dead. I couldn't believe it. It couldn't be real. It had to have been a dream. A nightmare. Yeah, that was the only explanation. Dying in such a horrific way. And if that wasn't already enough, it was Rimi who had killed them. I didn't want to believe it. There was no way I could. But it was the truth. I didn't understand why Sena and Kosupi had suddenly turned hostile and tried to attack me. She had said something about IR too. It probably had something to do with my essay from back when I was a kid, but I couldn't care less about that now. After that, Rimi had been revealed to be a gigalomaniac, something that honestly hadn't surprised me too much. But then, she fought to protect me. She might have gone too far, sure, but there was no way I was going to hold a grudge against her, a grudge over that. Well, that's a bit surprising. Still, if things stayed like this, both Rimi and I would get caught by the police. Sena and Kosubi's corpses were just lying around out there. Eventually, someone would find them and notify the police. I couldn't get caught. As if I'd ever let that happen. I could just tell the truth. I hadn't killed anyone after all. Rimi had. And besides, Sena and Kosubi had attacked me first, so they had to count legally as self-defense. But I was well aware that none of that would work. Back when the Cruc-affixion had happened, I'd almost been named the culprit. There was no doubt in my mind that it would go the exact same way this time. Moreover, I needed Rimi. If she didn't exist, if she wasn't here to protect me from the threat of Shogun, I'd be completely fucked. So when I learned the truth that she was a gigalomaniac, I hadn't been horrified. If anything, I welcomed it. She wasn't powerless. She wasn't just a naive high schooler. She was my ally. One who even wielded the power to protect me from Shogun. That was why I wanted her to wake up so badly, and sooner rather than later. I get her to erase Sena and Kosubi's corpses of her delusion powers. Once she did that, the police would no longer be able to get to us. Nobody had found their bodies yet, right? Holding back my urge to throw up, I looked at the door. Kosubi's bloody corpse was just outside, and therefore unlikely to be found. But Sena's wasn't. Sena had fallen off of the roof, meaning someone could easily stumble upon what was left of her. It'd be the end if that happened. Seeing how Rimi wasn't waking up, I'd have to cover up their bodies somehow. I bet you Nozomi's already on top of it. Just the mere prospect terrified me. I wouldn't even want to look at someone's corpse. Now I was not even mentioning the fact that I knew them, which made it so much worse. Even so, I desperately shook away my fears. And then, I went outside. Had to ensure my and Rimi's safety. It was already dark out, leaving my surroundings very dim. I didn't even have the moon to help. The clouds were hiding it. Straining my eyes, I looked over to where Kosubi was lying. Huh? But I couldn't find it. I couldn't find Kosubi's tragic corpse. See? They're already on top of it. There was still a pool of blood, so I couldn't laugh it off as it was all just a dream plot twist. But her corpse was completely gone. What the... Starting to get really confused, I stuck my head over the edge of the roof and peered down at the street below. There was no one there. And Sena's corpse wasn't there either. There was clearly something down there. Something I immediately understood to be a pool of blood. But that was it. No people, no corpse, no body, nobody freaking out. Nothing. Where had her corpse gone? The corpse had definitely been there after Rimi had lost consciousness, so Rimi couldn't have erased her of her gigalomaniac powers. But then, who could have? Ayase? No, she was still hospitalized in Yoyogi. Then, Shogun? But he was my enemy. There was no way he'd ever do something that would have benefited me. What the hell was going on? Feeling both vaguely anxious and incredibly relieved about the corpse's disappearing, I let out a deep sigh. Then, I felt chills on the nape of my neck. I was being watched. It was the usual mysterious gaze. Shogun? Is that you watching me?
僕を見るな。
I ducked into my room. Oh, welcome back to the land of the living. Rimi had gotten up. She was looking around the room with a vacant expression on her face. Guess she'd finally woken up. But what should I say to her? Killing Sena and Kosubi had been a pretty extreme shock to her. Then again, how was bound to happen if you killed someone? It wasn't like player killing in ESO. She'd also said she didn't mean to, and I was sure that only made it worse. I didn't know what to say at a time like this. So in the end, I couldn't help but say nothing. Rimi looked at me and tilted her head curiously.
ここ、どこかな? あなたは誰?
Huh? Rimi was acting strange.
リミどうしちゃったの?
リミって誰だろう? 私かな? 私、リミじゃないよ。
何言ってるんだよ。しっかりしてよ。
Amnesia brought on by pure shock?
私の名前はわかんないや。
嘘でしょ。嘘だよね。
I pressed her for an answer.
本当だよ。
Right when she said that, Rimi jumped into my arms and started clinging to me. She rubbed her cheeks against mine like some spoiled kid, wanting attention. Having her so close to me, and so suddenly at that, I started panicking.
あなた、誰？私のお友達かな？きっとそうだよね。お友達ってね、つまりね、私に親切にしてくれる人のこと。あなたは怒らない？私、怒られるのやだ。あとね、痛いのもすごくやだな。
Amnesia? Or maybe even some form of age regression? I thought this kind of thing only happened in eroge. Do you watch any form of media other than eroge? It's not an eroge trope. Or at least an eroge exclusive trope. I can promise you that, Takumi. I would have never even dreamed of actually running into a situation like this IRL. But that was only a possibility. The sheer amount Rimi had freaked out when she killed Kozubi wasn't normal. And...
ギガロマニアックスとなったものは誰だろうと一度は壊れているんだよ。
I remembered late Sena's words. Rimi might have broken once again. She killed her own heart and mind. Suddenly those words came to mind. I couldn't quite remember where, but I had a feeling that someone had told me that before. If Rimi had killed her own mind from the shock of having killed Kozubi and Sena, and I was talking to an entirely new personality she had created, I could understand why she was acting like a child. If that's what's going on here, then effectively the Rimi that we've known up until this point is dead. In personality terms, at least. This took a really dark and depressing turn, to say the least. DID, Dissociative Identity Disorder, also known as multiple personalities. I'm not sure that's what's actually going on here, though. Yua had accused me of having it. Obviously, I didn't have it. But maybe Rimi was suffering from it now. No, I think it's just more a result of pure both shock and maybe her, as you just posited, her gigalomaniac powers backfiring on her mind and heart. This is all just speculation, of course. What I did know, though, was that the childlike Rimi in front of me now was nothing like the Rimi I knew. She wasn't the same girl who told me she'd stay by my side. The girl whose kindness had enveloped me. She was completely different now.
こんなの
I fell to my knees on the spot. I was overwhelmed with despair. As Rimi clung to me playfully, she peered at my face curiously. Her eyes were so serene, so beautiful. Purity overflowed from them. Purity that I couldn't stare back into. In a way, we were lucky that Sena's and Kosubi's corpses had disappeared. But if Rimi was like this, who's supposed to protect me now? I honestly am not sure what to really say here, past what I've already said. I had not expected any of this at all. I wasn't sure what I was expecting with Rimi's route, but certainly not something like this. So, for all intents and purposes, we've effectively got an amnesiac Rimi, or Rimi who, or a new Rimi since her old personality basically destroyed itself. I'm not 100% sure how exactly to interpret her state right this minute. If it's a death by personality sort of thing, or if it's just amnesia brought on by pure shock. Or gigalomaniac powers backfire, destroying her mind and heart. All I know for sure is that the Rimi that we've known up until this point has pretty much left the building upstairs, and now we've got this. At the end of the day, the end result is all that really matters here, and the end result doesn't really bode well, to put it mildly. I'm real curious to see how this is going to play out. Her interactions with Takumi, whether Shogun might actually do something, but try to do something about this if he catches wind. What exactly is going to happen, I wonder? All kinds of possibilities that are just popping up in my head here. All that being said, though, I feel like this is a good enough spot to stop his ending, so I'm going to go ahead and do just that. So, with that being said, I hope you guys have enjoyed this latest episode of Chaos Head Noah. If you did and you would like to see more content from me, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel, and I guess we'll see where the rest of this will continue on in the next episode. Take care.